Kian and I have just recorded this whole podcast for the final episode of Game of Thrones. What was it called, Kian?
The Iron Throne.
And it should be worth noting that we are not positive about the episode at all. And as a result, the tone of this whole podcast is slightly down. So with that in mind, this is our reaction to the episode.
Take a deep breath. Calm yourself down.
I fainted.
Oh shit, wake up, bud. We have a podcast to do. Have you dried the tears of laughter from your eyes at this absolute farce of... No. Oh my god.
This is the thing. I really don't know where to start. Like,
well, I'm gonna assume we're gonna have a lot of negative things to say about this episode, and not only this episode, but this being like the ending to the entire series. So I might as well skip ahead. I have something positive to say. Will I just say it? Doesn't matter where it occurs in the episode. Okay, I'll start positively.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. I did get tears in my eyes at one point, I have to admit, right?
Okay.
Now, I've always been a big believer in the kind of primal power of music in film and TV, right? So this has a very powerful part to play in this scene, which is when Jon is saying goodbye to his 3 cousins / siblings on the dock of King's Landing. And the reason is, I don't know, whatever about the writing, we can talk about the writing in a while, but the theme that played, the little leitmotif that played, was Goodbye Brother, which is on the season 1 soundtrack, which plays when Jon says goodbye to an unconscious Bran. And yeah, because like I pay such close attention to the music, I clocked that, I knew what theme it was, and it just kind of made me really emotional because it did bring it right back to the very beginning like that in a nice subtle way. And I don't know, it was just a final goodbye, and regardless of my problems with the rest of the episode, that music made that moment work for me personally. And I really I was brought into the show like fully in that moment.
Oh, good. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of the good moments in the show are because of the foundations and the groundings that they built in those earlier seasons.
Yeah.
And that is probably another example of that, because the composer has just reincorporated a theme from an earlier season, and that is kind of standard. So,
yeah,
you know, it's not surprising, but yeah, it's a nice little moment, and also just shows how strong all of those foundations were, that it can make you feel emotional just on the basis of how it used to be, almost.
Exactly.
The nostalgia.
Yeah,
because roll the clip of
here we go again.
No, don't worry, I'm not going to start telling you to roll the clip every 10 seconds.
I have a couple of clips of my own. I'm going to cue myself later on to roll as well.
Here, if you want to know what my reaction to this episode was, just listen to what Kit Harington said when he was interviewed.
If you could describe the season finale of Game of Thrones in one word, how would you describe it?
Disappointing.
That's basically it. I mean, I feel like I can't gather my thoughts here much, because I'm fresh off the back of watching this episode. Like, really, literally half an hour ago I finished watching the episode. So it's pretty raw to me, but I haven't sort of digested the idea yet that it's the end of the whole show. So I don't know. So all of the thoughts that you're going to hear from me today are going to be based on how I feel in the moment, fresh from watching it, and they might be a little bit too sort of subjective, overly sort of emotionally led. Haven't really had time to consider things from a rational perspective yet. But that's what you're going to get with this podcast from my perspective anyway.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. But so yeah, I'll be reactionary as well and quite subjective. But we will probably come back to Game of Thrones in the future anyway, when we've composed like a lot more cohesive thoughts on it anyway. But I will say, my overall view of these final 2 seasons, like I've been at an emotional remove from the show for the last few years, which is really kind of sad for me because I had been so emotionally invested in it before. But the most shocking thing for me personally isn't that I'm fuming with the final season. It isn't that I'm like livid with rage. It's that I don't care anymore, and I'm just so apathetic to everything. Like I can be disappointed, but I can't feel any really strong emotions about it, and that's the most shocking thing to me, considering where I used to be years ago. Yeah,
exactly the same for me. I mean, I feel a bit shocked after watching that episode for the same reason, that it's the end of the whole show, and I'm like you, I feel really ambivalent. I was laughing as you know, during scenes that were meant to be serious.
Yeah.
I was honestly stunned by how casually they seemed to approach things that they'd laid the foundations for in much deeper and more subtle ways, and then to sort of throw them away in a way which to me felt really well. Okay, let me backtrack a little bit, because last episode I said the episode with Dany burning King's Landing and stuff, for me as an episode of television it was one thing, and then as an episode within the context of Game of Thrones it was another.
Yeah.
As an episode of television, the last episode I gave 5 out of 5, if you sort of forget what you knew about Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And then within the context of what you knew about Game of Thrones and what it added to the whole story and all of that sort of stuff, I sort of said it's probably more like 2.5 out of 5. And I think that's probably accurate.
Now what about this one?
See, this is why I'm so shocked here, because this as an episode of television was really bad.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, I think the same.
I hate to be overly critical, but I honestly don't think it was a good episode of television. Like from the off, essentially. And it felt like they'd written scenes to be shown in a certain order and then decided against it halfway through or something. I'll give you an example with them finding Grey Worm in the street.
Oh Jesus!
Ordering the execution of those guys, and then Jon Snow and Davos appear to be walking somewhere to find Daenerys. And then
Grey Worm teleports to the top of the stairs up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that's no longer the same sort of teleportation that they've shown in the previous episodes, where they've just kind of discounted the length of time it would take to get from one area of Westeros to another. This is a whole another level, where it's like this isn't even fans being pedantic. This is
no, and it's not minor continuity either. It's major continuity.
Yeah,
it just makes no sense,
because they're heading towards Daenerys. That's where they're going, and then he's there. Like, that makes no sense at all, on however you want to dress that up. And then the whole scene with Tyrion, where Jon is talking to Tyrion, and then he goes to Daenerys. It feels really disjointed, because the emotion that Jon is displaying during the scene with Tyrion feels completely at odds with the emotion he's displaying at the scene with Daenerys. And it feels like the scenes were spliced together in a way, or something happened in post, or something happened in the production of it, because none of that whole sequence for about 15 minutes feels right from a continuity or chronology perspective. It's really odd, but yeah, it is. Yeah, you're right. You're completely right. On like on emotional and logistical, in terms of walking through the streets level, on both of those levels, you can't track A to B. It's like the alphabet doesn't make sense anymore. Yeah. It's weird. And I was kind of, I mean, backtracking a little bit, where Tyrion is uncovering the bricks to find Cersei and Jaime. It's meant to be this emotional moment. I didn't find it emotional. It felt completely pointless.
Yeah.
I don't know what it achieved.
Plus, it undermined that scene in the last episode as well, because, you know, that scene was shot and presented as if the whole place was caving in and it was inevitable that they died. But it turns out if they stood 30 feet to the left or right, they would have been fine.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of it in that way, but that's so true. I mean, it should have just been a whole mass of rubble.
Yeah.
And in order to get the moment of Tyrion finding his siblings underneath the rubble, they discounted what they showed in the previous episode. But beyond that, it doesn't even, there was no need for it anyway. From all they were trying to do was give Tyrion an emotional goodbye to his siblings, but you don't need that. You don't need that. You can have him thinking about them. You can have him doing something similar to what Brienne did. Like there's lots of different ways.
He could talk to Brienne about Jaime, maybe. Like, why not?
I mean,
that would have been interesting.
I know it's the whole exposition thing, but they've never shied away from exposition in the past, where they have characters talking about a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand. I just don't understand anything about this whole episode, really. I don't understand whether it was ash or whether it was snow. I don't.
Oh my god! Remember this? Yeah, I think it must be snow, bud. But that makes no sense. And the reason I say it must be snow is when, you know, Drogon is buried under a mountain of this stuff.
Yeah.
But even that makes, like, the way he shakes it off, and the whole scene kind of looks like it's supposed to be cold, but like the color timing and everything on it, like, it is a very cold colorscape. But
it is,
but that still makes no sense, because snow, like, how long was Drogon lying there for? How long did it take Jon to walk to the Red Keep? Like, that is a massive amount of snow.
Yeah, he's just lying there for like a week.
Days.
Yeah, I don't understand. I guess you could be covered by snow within like a few hours, in fairness, but it had to have been snowing pretty hard, which didn't then add up with the rest of everything else.
Like, it wasn't snowing all last episode, so we have to assume between the end of last episode and start of this one, it started snowing suddenly for some reason. What? I don't know.
Well, this is the
I
thing.
don't know what to say about this, because it's just so bizarre.
It's very bizarre, because, I mean, we had a sort of a very brief conversation, which I won't go into, but my point was that I was making was that it would be a visual mistake. Before I saw this episode, I was saying it'd be a visual mistake for them to have it both snowing and the ash. And to me, that was quite obvious. That would be what most filmmakers would think about. They wouldn't have both at the same time. They would have one or the other. And the reason for it is because as a viewer, when you're watching it, you don't want to be wondering in the moment whether it's snow or ash.
Exactly.
Because that's making you think, oh, is that snow or is it ash? And it becomes a moment of...
Yeah, it's like the fourth wall is gone.
Yeah,
at that
exactly.
point.
You shouldn't be pondering whether it's snow or ash during a scene about something more important. And to me, that was quite obvious from a visual perspective. And yet here we are wondering, even now, whether it's snow or ash. And if it was snow, it doesn't seem to make any sense in terms of how it behaves. And if it was ash, there's loads of it, and it's really white.
Yeah.
I mean, as you say, it has to be snow, and there'll probably be people who listen to this thinking, well, obviously it's snow. But the point we're making here isn't anything beyond that. Visually, they've confused the matter by having the ash falling in the end of the last episode, and then having this episode have snow in it, and have that snow not make any sense. But I mean, I don't think we're being pedantic. I really don't.
No, I don't think we are either.
But
it's one of many things that just completely took me and you out of the episode.
Exactly.
This time round.
Yeah, and
there's a list.
Exactly. When all these tiny details, or seemingly tiny details, add up and add up and add up, you end up feeling completely removed from the experience, and that's fine. When we've gone before about how if you're a casual viewer and you're watching something, it doesn't really matter too much if you're removed from the experience, because you're not watching it for that reason. You're watching it to be entertained, and that's fine. There are people who will be entertained by this episode, And fair play, you know. I would rather enjoy something than not enjoy something, obviously. But if you started the show and fell in love with it for one reason, and then by the end of it, it no longer delivers those same things, that's obviously going to be disappointing for some people. And we are those people.
Yeah. See, the funny thing is, even the way both of us watched this episode, because I know how you watched it, you were giving me, where you were kind of taking notes for yourself in the form of voice notes on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Just like, so you could have a few points and go back to them as they were occurring in the episode. But, you know, you were kind of removing yourself from the world of the show to do that. You know, you were kind of providing commentary while I was doing something similar while I was watching it, which was, I face-palmed a lot. I watched it by myself, and I spent a lot of the time with my, like, cringing and putting my hands up to my face, and like that's really weird for me because usually I eat up every visual detail. Like I love looking at like shape and colour and light and shadow and blocking and all this sort of stuff, but this episode completely took me out of it.
Yeah, same. I didn't feel like I was peering through into this world at all. There was a comment made at some point where I'd predicted jokingly that the end of this, or you might have predicted this jokingly, I can't remember who it was, that at the end of the show, Samwell Tarly would be reading A Song of Ice and Fire to little Sam as a bedtime story in modern times, you know, that, like, just to take it to the extreme. And, you know, that was the kind of the extension of the absolute end of the spectrum for how far it could have gone. And it was a joke, obviously. But when Sam plonked A Song of Ice and Fire down on the table later in the episode, and in combination with all these other elements where I was completely removed from the episode, it really felt like anything could happen. Like, in that respect, it really felt like someone could close a book and it be 2019 and it'd be David and Dan who then looked to the camera, kind of thing. Like, it was just getting to a point as the episode went on that just made it feel less and less like I was immersed in this world.
I was genuinely expecting Bran to just stand up out of the wheelchair at one point and start laughing evilly. Because why not?
And then what? Just sit down again.
Yeah.
And everyone just carries on.
Yeah. Just ignores him.
Well, I mean, Davos
why
did
not?
it. Davos had that moment where he said, "Well, I don't know if I can vote." Or what did he say?
I'm not sure I get a vote, but aye.
I mean, that was literally him stepping out of character and saying, "Why am I here? Why is Davos in this room? Who is Davos? How has he got to this point?" Like, no one knows, including the writers, including Davos himself. Like, you don't have... I mean, I guess that at least the writers are self-aware enough to know that Davos has no purpose in it. Like, at least they know that. But anyway, that's later in the episode, so we've definitely jumped around. But
will we backtrack and get specific then?
Yeah, why not?
About things. Okay. God, where do you even start?
I mean, we've already mentioned how Grey Worm teleported, so we may as well sort of go from around there, sort of 20 minutes in.
That's after Tyrion spends 10 minutes walking around the place, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, what's the 10 minutes of walking around do anyway, apart from
exactly. But
time.
That would be fine if it's conveying something new, but it's an emotion we're already familiar with and we know going into the episode, so there's no need for that amount of screen time to be spent on Tyrion walking around looking at the horror that we've already seen occur when it was more horrible. Because we already got that reaction from him last episode. We don't need to spend 10 minutes walking through the streets with him, especially when there are only 80 minutes left anyway.
So they spend 10 minutes just on Peter Dinklage's face as he walks around conveying no extra information.
No.
We sound really depressed during this podcast.
It's because we are.
Yeah, because we are. Like, I'm not going to fake it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty depressed.
Then, we see the respawned Dothraki and Unsullied.
Oh yeah, they just keep respawning.
Yeah. It's strange, isn't it?
Daenerys picked up their respawn card, like in Fortnite, and took it to one of those.
Oh yeah, she must. Oh yeah, she has the latest patch then, does she? She updated it.
It's season. No, she's got season 10. Yeah,
Oh, really?
This is what season 10 is. It's gonna cross over. Did you not see the bit where they crossed over? Oh no, that was Avengers, which is basically the same.
It's better. Well,
because it knows what it is.
Exactly.
And then all this stuff. Okay, look, I know we're going around a bit, but it's sort of necessary because it all interlinks. And Jon Snow has this stuff with Daenerys where he looks really disappointed with her, and then
disappointed. That's the perfect word for it. It's not horrified. It's not like absolutely disgusted. It's just disappointed.
Yeah, and with Arya as well, and but yeah, he has this moment with Daenerys, and then he has this moment with Arya, and Arya seems to be having to convince Jon that Daenerys has gone mad for some reason, even though it's quite clear. And then Jon seems to have to be convinced by Tyrion that Daenerys has gone mad, even though it seems to be clear. And then Jon seems to not be convinced by either of them, and seems to be settled in his own resolute view that Daenerys is his queen, and we're meant to believe that that's that. And then he kills Daenerys straight afterwards. So it then becomes really clear that all of those conversations were only in literally a scene and 2 scenes before, literally only in to try and make the audience think maybe he will still support Daenerys, which was fruitless anyway to try and make the audience think that. Yeah. And secondly, he doesn't. So it's kind of, it becomes clear the reasons for it shortly afterwards, but it doesn't become clear the reasons for the characters' motives. It becomes clear the writers' motives. And you know, when the writers are giving away their motives through the characters, what do you say about that?
It's so weird and bizarre. Like my brain is a whirlwind now, trying to organize all of this into something tangible.
Yeah.
But I don't think I can right now. Like, I won't be able to for a few days. I think I'll have to think about it and talk about it a lot more.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Jon and Dany thing, it even the way it was shot and played out, it seemed really cliched as well. I
pissed myself. Like I honestly, like, I burst out laughing. Like, that is not the response that moment was meant to have. And the reason I pissed myself was because of how cliched it was, where it felt like I knew what was going to happen by this point, but I didn't know it was going to happen there. And then it felt surprising that it happened there. So I pissed myself. Because it goes back to the whole subversion of expectations thing again. Like, it was surprising that it happened in that moment, but that's not necessarily a good thing. Like, I knew what was going to happen, and the reason it was surprising that it happened in that moment wasn't because of anything good. It was because it was out of nowhere. The moment was just completely doesn't ring true. You know, in the sense that he's there saying, "You are my queen, you'll always be my queen." He's only just said to Tyrion, you know, she'll always be my queen, and that's that. And then he kills her.
Yeah.
Like, why has he just been saying all this stuff, if not to try and subvert the expectations of the audience? That's it. There is no inner motivations there. Now, Kit Harington did a good job at trying to show this inner turmoil, but we deserve, as an audience, longer than 2 minutes of character exploration to show the downfall of the downfall and the turmoil of the 2 main characters of the whole series.
Yeah.
That's all we got. We got 2 minutes of downfall for Daenerys, followed by 15 minutes of Daenerys then standing over her whole army, seemingly uncontrite for what she had done. And then we've got literally 5 minutes of Jon in emotional turmoil about what to do. Yep. 5 minutes! And on top of that, bearing in mind, it all falls a bit flat anyway, because it doesn't really feel as if, as an audience, we've been shown how much Daenerys and Jon fell for each other in the first place, since it was half an episode in the last season where they fell in love. So the whole thing falls flat anyway. Why? Because from an audience perspective, it's like, why should he feel any emotional turmoil about this? So exactly. It all feels completely odd that he even is having to be convinced. Given the Jon that we know.
Yeah.
And as I said, it turns out he doesn't need to be convinced because he does it anyway. Just really, really odd.
It's totally odd. And even then, following on from that moment, you have Drogon coming down and melting the Iron Throne. Like, I wasn't aware that these dragons had the cognitive ability to grasp abstract notions like what a chair represents, that it represents power and turmoil and war.
It doesn't.
What's he doing burning that throne? That makes no sense. Okay, if it gets burned in the books, right, if that's where they're taking this from, I can almost bloody guarantee that it happens as a result of him going crazy over the whole throne room.
Exactly.
And it's collateral damage. It's not the target of his rage because Daenerys is dead.
And it might even have one of the characters seeing it happen and they interpret it in that way, because that's how George writes. You know, but this is the thing. I've seen some of the comments about this episode and the previous episode was like, oh, if you didn't think Daenerys was going to go mad, you haven't been paying attention. There's loads of reasons why she should have gone mad.
Exactly. That's not our argument at all.
Our argument isn't that. I'm not arguing that Daenerys shouldn't have gone mad. I'm not arguing that for the overall story that these story beats shouldn't have occurred. I'm not saying that Daenerys shouldn't have gone mad. I'm not saying that Jon shouldn't have ended up killing Daenerys. I'm not saying even that Drogon shouldn't have burnt the Iron Throne. I'm saying that in those moments they didn't ring true and they all fell flat because we didn't have the grounding or the time to explore these characters to the best of their ability. The key thing is with art, obviously everybody's interpretation of any type of art is going to be filtered through your own expectations, your own experiences in the past, your own reading of a specific event, your own interpretation of all of these things, and it filters through all of these things and it creates your opinion of that art. That's why something like Fellowship of the Ring may not be the strongest piece of entertainment ever produced, but it can be someone's favourite film of all time, or even why something like Back to the Future can be someone's favourite film of all time, because it may not be perfect, but there are elements that just really strike a chord in people. So I'm not taking away anything from those for whom this struck a chord, but what I'm saying is, for the reasons that it originally struck a chord with me, those reasons no longer apply, and it stripped away those initial reasons. So it's like me making a children's cartoon and then towards the end having, swear words and all sorts of stuff, and it's going to be jarring for the children, and the parents will suddenly not like the show. It's the same concept. This used to represent something. This used to be a type of show and story that was delivered in a way which appealed to me as an individual and to other people as an individual, for whatever reason. And we try our best to break down those reasons, and that's the whole point of discussing any type of art. Yeah. And those things are no longer presented. Sorry.
Exactly. So, no, I was just going to say what you said there, and that's why we're kind of struggling to grasp this right now.
Yeah.
Because it seems it doesn't really mean anything. There's no meaning to this at all. There doesn't seem to be any thematic resonance.
That's so true.
I'm more and more convinced by the day that when David Benioff said in that interview the themes are for 8th grade book reports, that he was actually serious, which is scary for a writer as renowned in Hollywood as he is. But there you have it.
Yeah, I mean that's just simply not true for a start. I mean,
no.
that's not a subjective comment. That's just demonstrably false.
Yeah.
If you were to look at any of the truly great writers, they may not
George
have,
included.
Yeah, George included. Now he may then point to the fact that, well, no, George says it doesn't mean this or this or this politically, and it's like, well, no, that's not the same thing. It's still,
that's allegory. That's not theme.
Yeah, it's still thematic.
Yeah.
And there were times during the episode where it seemed to have a little bit of a grasp on the themes, such as when Jon and Daenerys are having this final conversation, and Daenerys says something about, I'm doing what's right or what's good.
Yeah, yeah.
And Jon says, well, how do you know what's good? And that's actually a really good line, because it's in keeping with the overall theme of Game of Thrones and the books. And it's also applicable to modern times without being a direct nod to modern times.
Yeah, exactly.
So that shows a grasp of themes, but it was relegated to a line or two. They needed more time to explore the culmination of the theme.
Like, in terms of big things that happen in this episode, there are only really two, aren't there? It's just Daenerys dying and Bran the whole Bran fiasco. Let's go. Let's dig our teeth into this.
I pissed myself again. Like, not only did I piss myself because of what was happening in this next scene where they're all sat around, but I pissed myself about everything. Like, it was the fact that it seemed to skip ahead in time.
Yes, it did. Yeah,
but
there was the first fade to black. Now, I think it's the first fade to black in the show.
Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's been plenty of cuts to black, but that's different. Fade to black, like, as you know, it implies passage of time and stuff, and that, I don't think that's ever been in the show before. So, right. Well done, guys.
Cool.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, so fades to black, there's no longer any snow/ash, so that also implies passage of time. It looks kind of sunny again, which means, I don't know what that means. I mean, they've abandoned the whole idea of seasons.
Yeah.
So I have no idea. They're all in one place, like the Avengers. Davos self-parodies his own existence.
Yeah, and do you know what's really, really bizarre about this?
What?
The fact that there are a few extras in the scene, right?
Yeah.
But they are out of place because we've gone so long with just the main characters being relevant and being around each other that it just looks really weird when there are actually other people featured.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah, it
there's
does.
There's that random Prince of... Is he the Prince of Dorne? Oh, yeah, he is. Varys said it. Yeah, and, like... Okay. I don't know. It's just bonkers, isn't it?
Oh, totally bonkers. And then the whole stuff with Edmure. What are they doing?
What are they doing with him?
What are they doing? Why is he... What...
What's he say? Like, what? Why does Sansa tell him to sit down? They forgot to add in the laugh track after that line, I think.
And I like to think my experience has led to some small skill in statecraft and an understand.
Please sit.
Well, he was meant to be making a fool of himself.
What is that moment? What are they doing?
Why should that have any resonance for any of the audience whatsoever, considering we haven't seen Edmure for like 3 seasons?
Yeah.
And it has no place there at all, that whole moment.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been better off just not having Edmure there, I think.
Yeah.
It would have been like... this goes back to the whole stuff we used to say earlier on in this season about how the earlier Game of Thrones used to do this thing, which The Wire also does, where it only has characters whom are relevant to the situation and the scenario. So The Wire had this thing where if a cop was investigating something, it wouldn't just necessarily use one of the cops we'd already been introduced to. And then Game of Thrones did this thing where if there was a lord of some place, they wouldn't just use another character. They would introduce that new lord. And now, the last couple of seasons, we know that it's become Avengers-esque. But then it just comes to a whole new level when they've got Sansa, Bran, Arya, Brienne, like all these characters who wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Why are they sat there? I mean, this is the thing. If you think about it for like a second, it doesn't make any sense. And
No.
even if you don't think about it for a second, then it's jarring for an audience member anyway, which is why people are saying that they haven't enjoyed it.
Yeah. Hang on. Why are they there in the first place?
To discuss with Grey Worm about they want Jon and Tyrion to be free.
Oh yeah, Grey Worm, who inexplicably didn't kill Jon the moment he found out what happened.
Yeah, also Grey Worm, who, despite 6 seasons of character development, had his whole character reduced to only doing, and only thinking exactly what Daenerys told him to do and think. Again, that doesn't mean I don't buy Grey Worm doing the things that Daenerys tells him to do. Doesn't mean I don't buy that. What it means is we need to see that. We need to see we know that character is 3-dimensional now. So now once we know that character is 3-dimensional, we've got to see some of the struggle that's going on. We've got to see some of the things. This whole episode should have been stretched over like a whole season.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it really should.
We've discussed that before about the problems with the short season, but having all these things happen in a few scenes, and then within those scenes giving screen time to people like Edmure catching his sword on the concrete as he tries to walk backwards, and then everyone smiling between themselves.
It's a parody. I don't know what to say. I can just I've literally just leaned back in my chair and started laughing because I don't know what to say. But even why do they start listening to Tyrion anyway? Why do they give him the time of day? He's a prisoner. Why doesn't Grey Worm clock him on the head and tell him to shut up?
Because they need to get this. They need to finish the story. Which
oh yeah, because Tyrion's smart, isn't he? Despite not being smart for 2 whole seasons,
yeah.
He's smart. He's a
smart
guy,
when he says things that are quite obvious. When he steps forward and says things in a very solemn tone, and then people know that they should listen to him, even though what he's saying is just completely obvious anyway.
Yeah.
Oh. and then there's like Jon. Okay, so Bran is now the king.
Oh man, that is hilarious.
I mean,
we haven't understood Bran for we've questioned Bran's role and his existence and his identity for I don't know how long now. Plus they skipped the season with him anyway. But what?
Oh,
I don't. Why is he the king?
Why is he the king?
But and then we also have Sansa wanting the North to be independent. It was like, why should anyone else follow Bran if his own sister won't follow him?
She's like, I love you, Bran. You're a great guy. You're my little brother. But listen. And he's like, I understand.
But then, also, they try to get across the idea that this was Bran's plan all along, right? That everything that happened to get to this moment. But they play that in a kind of lackadaisical, airy-fairy, happy way. But no! If Bran was intentionally behind all of this, then he allowed everything to happen.
Yeah.
He had the ability to stop all the horror that's happened, and he didn't. So how does no one pick up on that?
Well, it's because the writers are playing on the idea of destiny, right? They're relying on us going, oh, well, that's destiny, and that's what they're saying, blah 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 blah. But we still need to understand how that plays into the world and how the characters respond to this idea of destiny, even if that is the case.
Yeah.
Which they don't. We don't have any idea how the characters respond to this. We don't know why they just accept it from Bran. We don't have any of the fallout to that. Not everyone just accepts. Okay, if God came down tomorrow, and I'm not saying Bran is God, but in the real world, and he would have a lot of things to answer for, and people would want to know.
Yes.
If someone has that level of control and omniscience and omnipresence, then it would just follow logically that they would be under scrutiny, which he isn't. He's just ignored and then made king. He's ignored for like a whole season, and then they're like, even though we've ignored you because we just don't want to like approach the concept because it's too difficult to work out in script form. Like, we'll make you king now.
Oh Jesus! But Bran is so useless, isn't he?
No, he's not, because at the end, when they wonder where Drogon is, he's like, I'll go and find him, or something.
Yeah.
So, no, he's not useless.
He's not useless. Oh yeah, fair enough. And that's a small council meeting where Bronn is master of coin, isn't it? Bronn, who mere seasons ago, and I'm going to speak to my future self who is editing this now. I'm going to tell him to roll the clip because there is evidence of this.
I've never borrowed money before. I'm not clear on the rules.
A few seasons ago, Bronn did not know what a loan was. He did not grasp the concept of loaning money. Yet now he's a suitable candidate for Master of Coin. Right? Okay, fair enough.
And
why not? Why not? He's a character we know and love. Fuck it, throw him in.
And 2 episodes ago, he was, or 3, or whatever it was, he was threatening Jaime and Tyrion to kill them. Yeah,
mate, you can cut Bran. You can cut Bronn from this whole season, and nothing changes.
Bran or Bronn?
Oh, both. Both. Doesn't matter.
Who did you mean?
I meant Bronn.
Right. Yeah, but both. Yeah, but yeah, you could definitely cut Bronn. Why did they? Oh God! Why did they say? Why did Cersei offer him that money to kill them? It made no sense because nothing happened, and all it did was added this supposed sense of peril, which never materialized anyway.
Exactly.
Honestly,
Bronn should have died last season when he saved Jaime from Drogon.
Yeah, he should.
That was the moment. They should just kill him. Whether the fire gets him or he drowns trying to like help Jaime, just get rid of him then and there.
Yeah, he certainly shouldn't have been bloody Master of Coin.
Master of Coin.
And then
he's on a level with Littlefinger and Tyrion now. They've both held that position before. Just think about that.
Oh my God.
Bronn.
Jeez. So yeah, that's a really good point. So when you think about what they did in season 1, oh my God. So in season 1, when we had a king who was apparently a little bit useless, Robert Baratheon, he had a council full of people who were all basically the best at their job. People like Littlefinger, who was, and Peter Baelish, who was this very intelligent, manipulative, scheming bloke. And then now in the final season, when we've got a character as king who we're meant to love and is apparently all-seeing and all-knowing, and a hand to the king who throughout the whole series has been established as being basically the most intelligent guy, they give Master of Coin to Bronn. That makes a complete mockery of like the world that they establish, the law.
Yeah.
Just give it to a character we've never seen before. It doesn't matter that we haven't seen the character before, and what is this obsession with having to give every single character like a suitable ending? Which is, I understand that part of it, but then the concern about introducing new characters. It doesn't matter if it's just one guy who's there in that scene.
No.
And it's because they wanted Bronn to randomly start talking about having money for brothels, thereby then showing how useless he is for the job.
Exactly. God, even that same point even applies to Sam, to be honest. Why is he Grand Maester? He was only in the Citadel for a little while. He didn't graduate. He doesn't know anything about metalwork, healing, anything like that. He just reads books. Why is he Grand Maester? He's supposed to be the one protecting the king and the most highly regarded of bloody all of them in the whole country. What's he doing there?
Oh, no.
Like, we like Sam, but come on.
Yeah. He read a book which had a diagram of how to remove grayscale, and he followed that perfectly. And even though everyone had said, "Oh, it's too dangerous," he literally just followed the diagram and then did it and cured Jorah. So he's brave enough to do that. Excuse me. Excuse me. I'm allergic to the final season of Game of Thrones. Oh man.
Do you know what? I will say though.
Yeah.
In terms of where Jon ends up, I like that.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
I really like that idea that because he has always been at home and at his most comfortable in the north, and he hasn't been the same man since Ygritte died and all that crap happened. But yeah, so like as an idea, I like him and Tormund and Ghost, who is now actually acknowledged again, going north of the wall to where is their real home. I love that. And like, I like the way it echoed a lot of the shots from like the first episode in that sequence as well. That was pretty cool. George Lucas would approve.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
And again, it's a lovely bookend. Like, it made sense how it ended in terms of story beats, but it was just, again, the fact that it was just all the stuff around it and the fact that it fell flat for me.
Mm-hmm. Sansa's Queen of the North.
Yeah. Woohoo!
Yay! Like, fine, good. I suppose she is a good ruler. Like, in Daenerys, right? Daenerys isn't a good ruler. She's a good conqueror and warmonger. I think that's been proven, right?
Yeah.
Because they're not the same thing. Whereas Sansa's a good ruler because she did have that line about not having enough food that one time.
Yeah, she did actually. Yeah.
So yeah, it makes sense. She's a good. She's a good candidate to rule.
And she's the smartest person that I has ever known.
Oh God, yeah. How could I forget? Yeah. And then she'd know how to use a knife the next episode. Yeah.
I just want to backtrack a little bit. Actually, it really annoyed me when Tyrion was moving the chairs. How light those chairs looked.
Oh God, they're big blocks of wood.
Yeah, in the first season, like he was dragging a chair that was really heavy to move it into position, and then here he is. They look like plastic chairs. So how has everything gone from? How has everything gone from looking like really like everything looked like it had less of a budget in the first few seasons, and yet it came across like everything was more authentic and real, and here we are in the final season where everything is obviously costs a lot and it somehow ends up looking cheap because he's moving chairs like he's lifting them up to push them in. But I'm being really 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 pedantic now, but it's because as I said, it's because it becomes as a part of this whole thing that it then becomes more noticeable, and you've got Bran sitting there and saying that he's going to go and see where Drogon is for no reason, and then you've got Jon going to the war, which, as you said, it's a nice story beat for him, and Sansa being queen, which fair.
And then Arya going west of Westeros.
What an awful line.
That she says that line in a previous season as well. I think is it season 6? She says it to what's she called, Lady Crane. Yeah, that is it. When she's on the run, when she's just been gutted by the faceless men, by the waif, and Lady Crane heals her. Arya's like,
Essos is east and Westeros is west. But what's west of Westeros?
Yeah,
what?
I mean, again, it was kind of like fine, but it was like it was the way she said it, and it was like it was profound somehow.
Yeah. Like, oh yeah, I've never thought of that. Wow.
Yeah. So
West.
no one knows. What's west of Westeros? No one knows. Okay. Like, and then there's like a little smile that she's been doing all the way through the season. Like where it has a close-up and she has a little smile / pout.
Yeah. So it's just Arya the Explorer now.
Oh God. It's like they're going to have a spin-off series of her. That's how it felt.
Oh, stop.
Did it not feel that way though? Like... and it felt like there's going to be a spin-off series of Bronn being Master of Coin, where it's like literally it's a sitcom, and there won't be a spin-off with Sansa and Jon, and they feel like the main characters really. Why does everyone always wear like black leather and stuff now?
Yeah, Jesus, didn't someone say that the other day? Did I say that the other day?
You said it the other day. Yeah.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? It is since season 4 when the production designer changed, because I remember thinking during Joffrey's wedding there's that big ridiculous lion head which doesn't seem to fit in with the world at all. Like, it looks way too modern, and like I love that episode, but at the time I was like, Jesus, what is that lion head? Where did they get that? It looks so weird and out of place. And yeah, since then that the costumes have gradually become more leathery and tight and black and just out of place.
It looks like steampunk now.
It does, yeah. That's a good point.
That's the end of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I just shook my head when you said that. I closed my eyes and shook my head.
That's the end of it.
Yeah. That's it.
I'm really disappointed.
Yikes. Like, so am I, because even last week, like despite the fact we agreed that last episode didn't have the appropriate setup to deliver upon those events as like a proper earned tentpole moment of the story, right? We still thought it was a really, really, really good episode, right? This is just a bad episode, as you said right at the very start of this. No matter what way you look at it, it's a bad episode of television.
I think
whether
Yeah.
you're looking at it as a Game of Thrones episode or something you switch on, where you flick to with the remote, like, it's a bad episode of television.
Yeah. You see, the thing is towards the beginning of that episode, where Daenerys is standing over her troop of soldiers, and it has this sort of amazing cinematic of that.
Yeah.
I had that sort of thought process. I thought, oh, this is good. If I just turn this on now, I'd be like, wow, this is amazing. Right, this is amazing. But then equally, that moment is weakened by the fact that Daenerys dies, like a scene after that, because the moment, what that's trying to say as a moment is, look at this amount of power that she has amassed. How frightening is that? And then the moment afterwards, she's dead, and that power's gone.
It's gone. Yeah.
So even in that specific episode, if I'd just switched onto it, I would have been like, well, why the grand showing of her being in power the scene before if she's dead already? Yeah. Like, even if you've only seen that episode, that's how you would feel emotionally afterwards.
Exactly. It's like the idea just doesn't have time to breed.
Yeah.
It's just cut off right as it's introduced.
Yeah, I mean this stuff with, if all of these beats happen, and you know, let's even think from the perspective of it being aesthetic. That shot of Daenerys standing there over those people represents her being in power and in control of all these people, and the devastation that she's just committed on King's Landing, and what that could mean going forward. That's what that shot represents.
Yeah.
So you have to have some kind of tension around what that represents. Now that tension should be 2 or 3 episodes at the very least, if not a whole season. So it's just it just beggars belief, honestly, what they've been doing in terms of the planning for this season, or the last 2 seasons, probably more accurately. Because even if they had the beats, and even if they wanted to cut the whole show shorter, there was another way of doing this. I'm sure of it. Has to be. You don't have to hit all the beats that George told you about. Okay, let's say they went, okay, we're going to have 8 seasons. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
George tells them all the beats. They go, okay, we're only having 8 seasons. We can't hit all of these beats. Okay, take out this beat. Take out that beat. Blah, 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 blah. Have Daenerys taking over King's Landing at the beginning of this season. Have last season showing her downfall in a more spectacular fashion. Have last season ending with the sort of cliffhanger of will she, won't she, you know, fall over the edge of that precipice of madness. You know, then you've got a whole season for the development of the downfall of her character. Then you've got a whole season for the actual downfall. And they didn't do those things. So even if you had specific beats that you were given by George, you don't have to show every beat. That's not what adaptation is about.
And in fact, that's why the first couple of Harry Potter films were worse than the third one anyway, because
they were too faithful.
Exactly, they followed the books to the letter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can be too faithful. It's actually why the Golden Compass film doesn't work, in my opinion, because they follow the book to the letter, but thematically and tonally it's completely off. So it feels like an overly long yet rushed interpretation of the book.
Yeah.
It's the same sort of thing, which is what they've done here. It's a dragged out and yet rushed adaptation of the books, which is the sort of the worst possible thing you can do. Have it feel simultaneously dragged out and rushed.
My God. Well, at least we'll have a reboot in 10 years.
But I don't know how the podcast ends.
It ends with a whimper, just like the show.